Welcome to day 16 of Hammerween, and you'll be pleased to hear I'm resisting the temptation, although I'm acknowledging it, of singing Ra Ra Rasputin, Russia's Greatest Love Machine by Boney M. So you've dodged a bullet there, folks, mostly because with my throat the way it is at the moment, this video will be 2 minutes long, ending with a coughing fit. So, 1966 Hammer production, this one, directed by Don Sharp, who we've come across a couple of times on our journey, and it's quite an easy one to digest. Quite a popular Hammer film, and this is one where I might be swimming against the tides a little bit, so we'll get to that in the review part. Plot-wise, it's the fictionalized story of Grigory Rasputin, the infamous, well, mad monk he's called in the title here. He was neither mad nor a monk, despite what the film says. Um, in terms of the plot, such a lot of his life, and indeed certainly his death, has been fictionalized anyway. So this kind of goes on the popular version of what people think they know about Rasputin. So it's not pertaining to be the life and times of, more a popular folk imagining of in a horror setting. So, in terms of plot, the film starts with an innkeeper's wife who looks to be deathly ill. The doctors have said there's no hope. And a tall, bearded, bedraggled man comes to the inn looking for booze and says, well, if I can't have booze, you have to give me an answer. Well, I'm afraid the innkeeper's not here. He's tending to his dying wife. She has the fever. Okay, anything to get his booze on, says this bearded stranger, who quickly goes up the stairs and solves the problem with his healing hands. The stranger, of course, is Rasputin himself. Now, Rasputin did initially want some booze as his reward, and quickly decides to take the daughter of the innkeeper instead. At first, she's very cooperative, but after a little bit of establishing that she's perhaps cheating on a lover, hmm, he gets a bit rapey, does old Grigori. So straight away we establish that this Rasputin is indeed not quite Russia's greatest love machine, but certainly one of Russia's greatest sex monsters. However, he does have these unnatural abilities. He does heal this woman with the power of touch, and it's pretty much instantaneous. She goes from death's door to being, "Oh, you'll be up and about in a few hours, love. Don't worry about it. Stick the kettle on." His infamy becomes local and becomes regional, and then because he keeps doing quite spectacular acts of mostly drinking rather than his healing abilities, he catches the eye of Sonia, who is one of the ladies in waiting for the Tsarina. Sonia is played wonderfully by Barbara Shelley, who we've talked about a good few times. In fact, is that 3 days in a row? Shadow of the Cat, yes. Quite a Mess in the Pit, yes. And today, there you go, Barbara Shelley week. She is smitten with Rasputin straight away. She kind of likes slumming it. She likes being in and amongst the working classes, having a good time party, getting away from all the highfalutin types of society. This film intentionally avoids quite a lot of comment on high society because, as MGM found out in the 30s, a lot of the folks involved in Rasputin's life and death are still very much alive at this point and could indeed sue. Although I don't think you needed to worry about the Tsar. With the... Anyway, there's a revolution, you might have heard of it. Bolsheviks and whatnot. Anyways, she becomes very smitten with Rasputin, but she laughs at his dancing, and he, in his only Christopher Lee fashion, intones, "You will apologize to me." And so she does. The next morning, she comes to apologize to Rasputin, and he's delivered that more as a prophecy than as a threat or as a, please give me an apology. He's almost said, like, I know you will come to me to apologize. So she does again the next morning. Turns up at his lodgings that he's now sharing with Dr. Zargo, played by the wonderful Richard Pascoe, who we met in the Gorgon last week. He's Rasputin's drinking buddy slash something else later in the film. So he has a quite an affair with Barbara Shelley's Sonia, little Sonia, and we realise very soon he's using her to work his way up into even higher society. So he uses her, places a hex on her, a commandment to hurt the young prince, and that will mean that they have to call for the only man in the land who can possibly save the young boy's life, Grigory Rasputin. So it's a bit of a Ponzi scheme, but again, all against the backdrop of he actually does seem to have these powers because nobody else can cure these illnesses, but he can. He's been excised from his own church, which again goes against quite a lot of historical evidence because Rasputin here is presented as a man of the cloth, a fallen man of the cloth, which wasn't quite true. He was more of a folk preacher. And also, the church accuse him of having powers that may be from the devil, not from God. And Rasputin defends himself rather wonderfully when accused of all sorts of, the rape earlier in the film, being a general drunkard and blackguard, by saying, "What's the point of giving God minor sins? We have to have some decent sized sins. Otherwise, we're not really worthy of being called sinners, and therefore we're not worthy of God's attention." I don't think that would stand up in court, but regardless, it's a belief. So Rasputin, it's no spoiler from this point on because this is the story of Rasputin as people think it happened. Works his way up into even higher society. He betrays Sonia, commands her to kill herself, which she does. That turns even his inner circle, like Boris Argo, the doctor, against him. And at that point, clandestine pact against Rasputin from the inner circle, but again, not including the very top people involved because legal ramifications, comes to fruition where they plot to murder Rasputin, which they do, even though he survives poisoned chocolates, a shooting, not a stabbing. I think he's run over by 300 horses. He's drowned. He's blown up on top of a grenade. He's basically, indestructible, right? Until they just toss him out a window when he dies. Probably should have led with the old window toss, really. Bit anticlimactic, really, because you've kind of presented this guy that can survive poisoning. He can survive being stabbed through the neck. Second floor window finishes him off, no problem whatsoever, though. Anyway, he had to die at the end. He's a pretty bad guy. So I don't think anybody's going to be too spoiled by the fact that Rasputin dies at the end. So again, I felt it did quite a bit of the plot down for the purposes of your not having to listen to me talk about all sorts of side characters like Ivan and Peter and the Tsarina's plots and blah blah blah. In terms of what I think of it, I think this is one of the most overrated Hammer films. Generally speaking, Christopher Lee's performance is towering, commanding, but it's very one note at the same time, very primal. He never changes it up. There's never a sense, I don't think, of great charisma from Rasputin. There's a commanding sense, but you don't get the idea that Barbara Shelley would really fall for this guy for anything more than a dalliance. Maybe she just wants a quickie with someone who looks a bit British and blah blah blah. So they throw in the supernatural stuff to explain that he can mesmerize people at Barbara Shelley to do his bidding. But I don't know. He even doesn't seem to have that level of power. Otherwise, he could mesmerize more people, surely, who he knows are afoot against him. So I don't think a lot of the film's kind of main character and main aims add up to much because they've had to be legally compliant and not name real names against in the Rasputin plot against, funnily enough, against Rasputin. They kind of have to play it a bit safe. And in doing so, they kind of hit the middle of the road, which is not where you want a Hammer film to be. The cast are pretty excellent. Francis Matthews is here. In fact, it's mostly the guest cast of Dracula, Prince of Darkness, as it was filmed right afterwards. Indeed, the part where the young Tsar has the accident on the ice is the part where Dracula falls through the ice in Prince of Darkness. So exactly the same part of Bray Studio. So they've really just got the actors to change like a rep company over the weekend. Right, Monday morning, guys, remember, Rasputin this week. And Francis Matthews is terrific in here as Ivan. We have um, what do you call him showing up? Joss Ackland as a very young looking Joss Ackland, but under heavy makeup to play a bishop, which is years before he became superstar Joss Ackland. Again, Barbara Shelley, I think, steals the show. She gives it a lot more than she's getting from the plot. But I just don't think there's enough here under the hood. I just don't think there's enough ideas. What's it really trying to say about Rasputin, about Russia, about people, perhaps? Nothing. I don't think there's terribly much in terms of ideas going on here. I think there's just a vague notion of he's a bit of a horror type character. That's enough to be getting along with. But because he's a real character, he's not horrific enough. Catch 22, I guess. And now we know the real story of what happened to Rasputin. He was trying to conduct a pact between Germany and his own Russia, and the British just murdered him, shot him twice in the head. They captured him and murdered him. So there was never any poisoned Madeira wine, as the legend goes. There was never the he survived this, he survived that. It's been a popular mythos for over 100 years now, but it's complete bullshit. Which was something the Russians, the Soviets, were happy to run with because it kind of made the establishment who they just brought down look as if they were using black magic. So if they can paint them as people who would turn to a figure like Rasputin, who was evil and dark and survived all these deaths and whatnot, then it made them look complicit in some sort of evil. So the popular conception was allowed to very quickly establish itself, when in all actuality, the British, of course, didn't want the Russians out of the war, so they just bumped them off. So it'd be a rather dull film if two posh English guys just burst in at the end and shot him twice through the head, wouldn't it? But again, for me, it's not the Hammer classic that a lot of people think it is. I think it is the most overrated Hammer, actually. I think it really is. In terms of where it lands for most people versus in terms of where I find it, I think it's very middling, and I never like the middle of the road. Again, towering performance from Christopher Lee, but very one note. He doesn't, and it's not his fault. The script doesn't give him anywhere to take Rasputin. Barbara Shelley's doing everything she possibly can to add more to Sonia than is on the page, but even Barbara Shelley can only do so much. So, uh, an interesting failure in some ways, but frankly, I don't quite get what a lot of people find to be so great about this film. I think it's, again, just so and so overrated. But hey, join me tomorrow for what will be on. That'll be day 17. Um, I'm banking a few of these in advance, so I'm having to do the maths in my head. Where we will talk about Taste of Fear, a film which is in no way overrated. And I'll see you then for more Hammerween. Till then, sleep safe.